Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about something that, well, it almost sounds made up. It's one of the most incredible moments in modern history, this little flash of humanity, right in the middle of a world tearing itself apart.
So, picture this. It's 1914. The Great War is in full, brutal swing. And right there, in the muck and the misery of the Western Front, thousands of soldiers just stopped fighting. They put down their guns. Not because a general told them to. Nope, they did it because it was Christmas. This is the incredible story of the Christmas Truce.
Now, to really get how unbelievable this whole thing was, you have to understand what things were like at the end of 1914. This wasn't just a war. It was an absolute meat grinder. The front lines were the last place on Earth you'd expect to find any holiday spirit.
You see, this war was supposed to be over in a flash, home by Christmas, right? But after just a few months, it completely bogged down into this bloody, awful stalemate. As you can see on this timeline, by November, both sides had dug themselves into the ground, creating that infamous line of trenches that would scar Europe for years.
And life in those trenches, it was just awful. A nightmare of mud, disease, and the constant fear of a shell or a sniper's bullet. But here's where things get interesting. For the guys huddled in those trenches, sometimes just a football field away from their enemies, something else was starting to happen. A sort of unofficial reality. All right, so let's dig into that, because the Christmas Truce, it didn't just pop up out of thin air. It was actually the result of these little seeds of, humanity that have been sprouting up all along the front. In the parts of the front that weren't seeing constant action, soldiers started this informal live and let live thing. Think about it. They were all in the same boat, dealing with the same misery. So you'd get these little moments of fraternization. These quiet agreements like, hey, let's not shoot at each other while we're trying to eat. And you had these official calls for peace, right? Like this one from Pope Benedict XV. But the generals on both sides, they weren't having any of it. But down on the ground, the soldiers themselves, they were already making their own little truces, way below the radar of the high command. And these weren't some big idealistic peace movements. This was purely practical stuff. Someone would shout across no man's land, hey, let's stop shooting so we can go get our dead. Or there'd be this unspoken rule not to fire when the food was coming up. Of course, the officers hated this. They knew it was a huge threat to discipline. Can't have your soldiers seeing the enemy as, human.
And then came Christmas Eve. And on that cold, clear night, all those little separate ceasefires, they all kind of blossomed into this one huge, remarkable event. Something people would be talking about 100 years later.
And listen, we're not talking about a few dozen guys here and there. The estimate is that around 100,000 troops were involved in this. And it all started so simply. In many places, the German soldiers put little candles and Christmas trees along the top of their trenches and started singing Christmas carols. And before long, the British soldiers started singing back.
Next thing you know, you've got shouts of Merry Christmas going back and forth. And then, the really amazing part, guys started climbing out of their trenches, no guns, just walking out into that desolate no man's land to shake hands, to share a smoke, to actually give each other little presents. You really have to read the letters the soldiers sent home to get it. Like this one from Private Henry Williamson. You can just feel his complete shock. He's writing to his mom about smoking German tobacco, given to him by an alive German soldier. The guy he was meant to be shooting at yesterday is now his friend. It's just marvelous, isn't it?
The stories are just surreal. This one from Bruce Bairnsfather is incredible. He talks about swapping buttons off their uniforms as souvenirs, sharing whatever food they had. And then there's this one image he describes that's just wild. One of his machine gunners, who was a barber back home, giving a German soldier a haircut right there in the middle of no man's land.
But, okay, there's one story that has become the legend of the Christmas Truce. The football match. The image of British and German soldiers kicking a ball around in no man's land. So the big question is, did it really happen? Well, this is where it gets a little complicated. You've got tons of letters from soldiers talking about it, like this German lieutenant who wrote that the English guys literally brought a soccer ball out with them. But then you have historians who are, rightly pointing out that the ground was a frozen, crater-filled mess. So what's the verdict? It seems like a full 11-on-11 match is pretty unlikely, but were there impromptu kickabouts? Yeah, almost certainly. And this is a perfect example of how powerful that legend became. This photo right here, it gets passed around all the time as the Christmas Truce football match. But it's not. It was taken a whole year later in Greece. It just goes to show you the idea of that football game was so perfect, so symbolic of the whole day that it almost didn't matter if it happened exactly like that. It became true in spirit.
But, of course, a moment like this couldn't last. The war machine was still there, humming in the background. And the guys in charge? Well, they were not happy about any of this.
Furious is probably an understatement. From the perspective of the high command, this wasn't some touching moment of humanity. This was a total breakdown of discipline. It was dangerous. How can you get your men to kill the enemy if they've been singing carols with them? So the orders came down fast and hard. Stop this immediately. Any more of it, and there will be serious trouble.
But for the guys in the trenches, it wasn't so simple. I mean, how do you just flip a switch and go back to shooting at people you were just sharing chocolate with? This quote from Captain Robert Miles really says it all. He says, "They can't shoot them in cold blood." The truce had made it personal. It had made the enemy human again.
And that's why, really, this was a one-time event. You had strict orders from the top. In the Christmases that followed, they'd schedule artillery barrages just to make sure no one got any funny ideas. And honestly, as the war got even more brutal and the death toll climbed into the millions, the bitterness just became too great. The moment was lost.
So, that brings us to the big question. Why are we still so fascinated by this story, more than 100 years later? What is it about this one day of peace in a 4-year-long nightmare that just sticks with us?
I think it's because it's become this huge cultural symbol. It's everywhere. You've got songs about it from people like Paul McCartney, you've got movies, TV shows like Blackadder and Doctor Who, even that famous Christmas ad from a few years back. Every time the story is told, it just drives home this incredible message about the human spirit.
And it's not just in stories. It's remembered in stone and bronze. Just look here. You have a photo from 1914, and right next to it, a modern monument commemorating that very event. It's a way of physically connecting us, right now, to those men in the trenches, to make sure we don't forget.
In the end, I think the Christmas Truce story lasts because it asks this really powerful question. It's more than just a break in the fighting. It's proof. It's this shining example that even in the absolute worst of times, our shared humanity can be stronger than any order to hate. It's a reminder that the lines we draw between us and them, well, they're just that. They're lines we draw. And for one incredible day, the soldiers just decided to erase them.